And what's fun about this concept is it can leave you a little scared in the short run because you go, well, gee, how do I feed myself and my family? And that, and I understand that dilemma. We all deal with that place within us that isn't quite ready to accept that we really are entitled to be supported, giving our gift of service. But if you can get by that scary part, and you keep showing up with what you think is the way you can serve, what I've discovered in my life is I end up with more abundance than on a material plane as well, than I ever really set out to create in the first place.
Right.
It's kind of surprising.
Yeah.
It's sort of like do the right thing and the money will follow. Marcia Sinitar's thing.
Yeah. Right. And, well, that requires the underpinning of faith.
And isn't there also like this law of either reflexivity or something that as you ask somebody, how can I be of service to you, and you actually serve them, that one of their natural responses is, and how may I serve you? And that's something that can go on exponentially.
Well, I think it does, and I think that the idea of an act of faith that Alan just spoke of in quotes, I just want to clarify. To me, the faith that you're referring to there, Alan, and it could be, by the way, it could be a religious tradition, it could be a spiritual tradition, but it can also be just a deep, profound awareness of how the universe works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I define faith as your orientation to the world based on your experience of it. And James Fowler, a great theologian, wrote a book called Stages of Faith that talks about how this concept of faith grows as your consciousness grows and as your experience grows. So you can have a very low-level narcissistic faith principle that simply says, everybody's out for themselves and I'll get mine before they get it from me. That's actually a faith principle. Or you can look at a larger perspective and say, we're all here for a purpose. We all share in a goal. There's abundance for all of us. And that the reason I'm put on this planet in this body is to accomplish something that's meaningful and that is of service. And that's a higher faith principle.
Yeah, and one of the things that would be fun, and I don't know, today won't be the day, but at some point in the future, I'd almost like to convene a conversation. And people could keep themselves anonymous. We don't need to know what their name is, and we don't want anybody to feel embarrassed or to hold back. But I'd love for the people who are a little frightened, who haven't been able to quite accept the truth of the inevitability of these laws of the universe we're discussing, where you will be supported doing what you're here to do. I'd almost like to hear from people who are a little afraid and have them tell us their concerns in the context of their very specific life, and see if we can't help them begin the process of migration across that veil almost of working from the place where you've been told you're supposed to be okay, when in fact you need to be on the other side of the veil.
Right.
Ronaldo, I feel like inviting everybody listening right now that if you got a concern that maybe this conversation is either too good to be true or that there are some significant flaws relative to what we're talking about and your notion of that's the way it is, of a different form of reality, please join in this conversation. And just, if you're already phoned in, all you have to do is click 1 and make a comment, and it will be anonymous, by the way, so you can feel free to air it out.
And let me add this to this, also for people who are listening. Not to think that, speaking for myself, I'm not speaking from a place in which I live this and know this all the time. I call work a spiritual gymnasium because it requires a lot of work. You need to continually lift more weights than you lifted yesterday, and that work provides you those opportunities all the time. Ethical dilemmas, interfacing with other people, and it also has a large call to fear and self-preservation. And I feel that. I'm not immune to that. And there are days I come to work and I'm in a very fearful mode. But I think at least I have the awareness of the dynamic of what's happening, and I have the awareness of other options, and that I'm in an environment in which I can grow, through that consciousness. So anybody who would be listening and thinking, wow, these are ivory tower ideals, these are simply things that actually work based on experience.
Well, and I can honestly say from my own point of view, I've lived my entire adult life from this perspective, and I took on a task of supporting the Academy, where I spend basically 30-plus hours a week, every week, 1986, working for the common good for no salary. And many people could say, gee, if you do that, you'll be not only unemployed, but you'll be broke. And I'm astounded at the amount of personal financial well-being I've achieved in my life. I'm astounded at the opportunities I've been given and that keep coming in almost a flood tide. And I'm convinced, in hindsight, at the age of 62, looking backwards, that very much my life choice was the cause of my abundance. Now, I didn't set out to be financially well off, but I got there. And I can honestly say that in each critical juncture of my career, it was this overriding set of values that kept me safe, or that gave me the instinct to make the right decision instead of the wrong one, or when I did make a mistake and I made the wrong decision, to know how to fix it and move on. So I really just want to share with people that from a very personal level, these concepts are not just the wisdom of spiritual or religious sages. These are the concepts of very practical people like Professor Michael Ray, people like Peter Senge, people like the dean of the business school, the Kellogg School, which I think is probably one of the finest 5 schools in the world, and also a fellow of the Academy, the dean of the Weatherhead School of Management, who's a fellow of the Academy, Stephen Covey, who you quote in your book, fellow of the Academy, Deepak Chopra, fellow of the Academy for 18 years. I mean, all of these people have a central awareness that there's a set of rules that are at work in the world, that if you can harmonize with them, your life has greater joy, greater meaning, and usually greater success. It's quite clear to me that kind of thinking is what's going to change the outcome, which currently is not positive, that the planet is encountering.
There's a call to this right now. I feel it, and I think people are being called, and I think to get the mystical, I think the Earth is calling out to this, and people are hearing it. But we have a sense, I think, unfortunately, that spirituality and success are at opposite poles, or certainly monetary comfort and spirituality are somehow different things. And I think what we're saying here, Ronaldo, and what you're living, and what a person like my boss, David Arena, who is one of the most successful real estate executives in New York City, and who's also a mystic and lives by deep spiritual, principles.
And we should point out, he's Catholic, not a Jew, for those people who are
right, exactly.
wondering if Alan has some secret rabbinical hold upon him.
Yeah, exactly. And that really living within the abundance mindset is always going to create more. It's going to create more because there's not a sense of lack. Epicurus, made this great quote, and I'm probably going to misquote it, but he said something to the effect that there is never enough to the man for whom enough is too little.
Right.
That in other words, if there's not gratitude for what you have, there's never going to be more, and there certainly is never going to be enough, and there won't be happiness and fulfillment. I
think that's so true, and where I'd like to kind of like refocus the conversation in some of the time we have left is you take one of the things I think people are a little afraid of from my conversations with them is that if they start to get, quote, a little more spiritual, close quote, somehow they'll lose their bearings.
Yeah.
That somehow they'll end up chanting in an ashram somewhere.
Right.
And that could happen, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when it does, it's not always a bad thing. I believe the Beatles got at least 2 albums out of that.
Yeah, right. I think it helped their careers. Yeah, right.
But the point is that it's not that people don't have to be afraid that somehow when you start to get spiritual, you're getting light in the loafers and you'll start floating away from the world. And the opposite is true. What happens is you start to find what your appropriate place in the world is, and that's where you become most effective.